Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. Joining us today is Nancy. And Nancy, we were just talking for like 15 minutes before the show, and I didn't ask you how you pronounce your last name.
Oh, Batterman.
Batterman, Nancy Batterman. She's an executive coach and author with more than 30 years of nonprofit leadership and management experience. She's written a book, yay, the
Hey.
Nonprofit Manifesto. It's a practical guide for leaders ready to stop surviving and start thriving. And of course, nonprofit leaders, right?
Yes.
Okay. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your own personal journey and then what you're doing as an executive coach?
Sure. So, yes, I was a longtime executive director, CEO of a nonprofit, actually 34 years. And when I was towards the end of my career, I had an executive coach who introduced me to the concept of the one-page strategic plan. And over time, convinced me to leave the organization after 34 years to become an executive coach,
Wow.
and that I could share the one-page strategic plan with more nonprofits. So, of course, I chose to do that not knowing the pandemic was going to happen in 2020. So, I started my business in 2019, and thankfully, I'm still thriving. And so, it's been a very exciting endeavor and work with many nonprofits. So, that's been fun.
Oh, fantastic. And I launched my freelance business. I went freelance in 2008, right when the Great Recession hit.
Of course.
So, we're kindred spirits, I think, in that respect. But like we were saying before the show, it really helps you define what the value is you can bring
Mhm.
and how you can help your clients. Tell me a little bit about your executive coaching for the nonprofit leaders. What is it, the value that you're bringing to these leaders?
So, a couple of things. One, I help them build their leadership teams, particularly if they're a larger organization, but really a focus on considering their business a business, right? A lot of nonprofits come because they're passionate about their work. They believe very strongly in their mission, but don't always have a business focus or even think about they say, well, I'm a nonprofit. And I'm like, that's just your tax status. It has nothing to do. So really bring a business focus to working with nonprofits.
And in terms of the business focus, when you're meeting these leaders, that's curious. I'm curious what kind of backgrounds they have. I mean, you meet a CEO in most walks of business world, walks of business life, and they've got business background, they're steeped in the financials, they think P&L. Is it different for the nonprofit leaders? What are their backgrounds like?
Typically something related to what their mission of their organization. So, for example, I thought I was going to be a special education teacher. I ended up working for an organization that worked with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Okay.
So, my background was education. I have another client who had her PhD in reading, started a literacy organization. So usually it's tied more and related more to what the mission of the organization is than for a business. I went back and got my MBA. I woke up one day and thought about it. It was like, oh my gosh, I have 300 employees. I got
Wow.
to really know what I'm doing, and I got to make sure that I keep these folks employed. So I went back and got my MBA so that I would feel more comfortable running the business part of it.
So Nancy, tell me about your personal journey as an exec. I mean, you touched on it before, but that's interesting to me that you woke up and said, I got to figure out what I'm doing, because I can relate to that as a marketing agency owner. My background's as a writer. Same thing. I mean, it was like running the agency, and then one day I woke up and I'm like, I don't even know how to read a P&L. I mean, what am I doing here? What happened to you where all of a sudden you find yourself at the executive and with 300 people under you? I'm curious.
I started when the organization was very small. We served 8 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And after about 4 years, the founder decided to leave to raise a family. And so I moved into the executive director job. I was very fortunate in that we were part of a larger organization. So there was a CFO in that like parent organization, and
Okay.
I sat with him, and because I couldn't read financials, right? I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher. And so he really worked to teach me the financials. But the my mentor Garland Peed, who ran the parent organization, was a great businessman and was very supportive. And I really enjoyed the program development part of the job. So we expanded into 5 counties in California over time. And as we grew, that's kind of when I was like, oh my gosh, I'm running, not even a small organization anymore. I'm running up, close to a mid-sized organization. I
Right.
really need to. And how I describe it is I had all of the puzzle pieces when I went back to get my MBA, but I didn't get them in order, right? I kind of learned them as I needed them. And so doing my MBA really put all those pieces together. So I really understood how all the different aspects of the business connected.
So tell me a little bit more about the business side with a nonprofit. I mean, are they thinking, am I, business, you think of revenue in terms of how much, money you're getting for people to buy your products and services. On the nonprofit side, are you thinking about strictly in terms of funding dollars?
Yeah, and even I would say not even thinking about that, but thinking about how do I deliver quality services? How do I serve my constituency? How do I make sure that I'm meeting my mission? Um, and a lot of them don't even really think about, I'll have somebody reach out to me and say, I want to start a nonprofit, and they'll tell me about it. And I'll go, great. How are you going to get funding? How are you going to, where is your funding going to come from? And they're like, oh, I'll get donors. And I like, do you know any donors? So I kind of go through their questions. A lot of times they don't even think about that until the organization is up and running. And then they realize it needs financial resources to sustain itself. I worked with one client, a membership organization, did their strategic planning with them, and wanted to give all their memberships away. And I kept saying, how are you going to fund your services? You need to have money. You need to focus. And the treasurer said to me, well, we're a mission-based organization. I'm like, that's great. Every nonprofit's a mission-based organization. But I said, no money, no mission. And they eventually closed because they just never saw the importance of funding to driving the impact the organization was going to have.
That I just can't get my head around
I
that, to be
know.
quite honest with you. And is that pretty widespread? I mean, is that what you see as the biggest problem with most nonprofits?
I would say funding, diversification of funding. Usually they'll get, have kind of one large benefactor, one large grant. And so it's really important to diversify that funding, particularly, certainly now there are things in California going on at the state level and at the federal level. So you don't want to be really relying completely on government funding because it's all uncertain. And so then there's, to try to do things then, now it's really competitive for grants and individual donors. So you want to try to do those things over time.
My accountant once said to me, "Just make money. That's all I can tell you." I mean, there's a certain degree of truth to that with nonprofits as well.
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, the more money you make, the greater the impact you can have in the community. And that's what really brings it back to them. Oh, yeah, I want to have an impact. I want my, organization to serve more people. It's like you need more money to do that.
Right. So tell me a little bit about how you get people to think in terms of being both mission driven and business minded.
So, well, it's part of the reason I'm certified through the organization called Metronomics. It's a coaching organization, 70 coaches around the world. There are 3 of us that are full-time nonprofit coaches. So the rest are business coaches. So that model really has a business focus. And the founder, Shannon Susko, has great business tools that she's developed in 2 successful businesses. And she shares those tools with coaches. So I use those tools with my nonprofit clients. And sometimes they get it right away, and otherwise it's, they're, why are we doing this? We talk about strategy. What's your strategy? What's your 3-year highly achievable goal? What's your BHAG, your big hairy audacious goal? So then, and then what's your profit per X? And that's the tough one. Profit, we don't need a profit. I'm like, yeah, you do need a profit. So we kind of talk through those things, and then put them all into the one-page strategic plan.
Nice. Okay. Metronomics, what exactly does that term mean?
So it's what kind of the combination of a metronome and the rhythms of business, and then economics is how she got the name Metronomics for
Okay.
her organization.
Okay. I've figured the metronome figured in there somewhere.
Yep. Yep.
I've seen the one-page strategic plan. I think it's really effective. It really makes you focus, hone in on your message. Tell me a little bit about working with that, and maybe what are some of the elements, and how long does it take to create and implement?
Sure. And the story that I tell, because this is really how it all came to fruition, is that I searched my entire career for an effective strategic planning process. Nonprofits do strategic planning on a regular basis, or should be. Like many organizations, we would spend 6 months on a strategic plan. We'd produce it. It'd have 30, 40 goals, be this gigantic thing. You can
Right.
tell how long I worked, because at the beginning, we'd put it in a ring binder and it'd
Yeah.
go on a shelf. Now
Yeah.
it's
On the
on
shelf.
your, right? Now it sits in your computer somewhere,
Yeah.
and no one, until a board member says, what happened to that strategic plan? And then you're like, oh my gosh, and you have to whip it out. And so when I found the one-page strategic plan, I was excited because, one, it's one page, it's not 35 or 40. It really limits you to the 3 to 5 most important activities you want to accomplish in a year. And those things tie to your 3-year highly achievable goal. What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to be in 3 years? And that builds up to your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal, which is, where do you want to be 10 to 30 years? Kind of your guiding light, your northern star. So when you have all of those pieces, you're continuing on an annual basis to get closer to your 3-year highly achievable goal, which gets you closer to your BHAG. So that process was powerful. And then the piece that I think most nonprofits miss is this system actually has quarterly priorities. And so if I either meet with the organization on a monthly basis, but most definitely on a quarterly basis, and we review the last quarter. What did we learn? What did we accomplish? What do we need to accomplish in the next quarter? So it really operationalizes the strategic plan. And that's the part most nonprofits are not so good at. I wasn't good at it. And so that's part of what and even why I wrote the book, is to help nonprofits not make the same mistakes that I have made.
Let's talk about a few of the mistakes you've made, if you're willing to share. Over a 30-year career, which is very admirable. What were some of the main things, and we're going to talk about your book, The Nonprofit Manifesto, here in a minute, but what were some of the big stumbling blocks for you along your journey?
I'm a very task-oriented person. I'm really good at getting things done. But I realized over time, and particularly as my organization grew, that I really had to have a focus on the people part of the business. And so I had to make a conscious effort over time to, to focus on the people as well as the tasks. I think the one lesson that I've really learned as more as an executive coach is the importance of self-awareness, and really having self-awareness about who you are, what you're good at, where you need help, and where you need support, so that you can fill in with other people around you that complement the areas where you're not so good, and to have a leadership team who's willing to stand up and push back. I was on the disc. I'm a 99D, so love challenging problems, but can be demanding, and push people hard. And I also learned that I couldn't just move on. I had to bring people on with me over time, but really understanding that self-awareness and helping others to be self-aware. And so I do a lot of that in my practice now, different assessments, the advanced insights, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, strengths, to really help people understand who they are, and where they need other people to support them.
I'm curious, you mentioned a lot of tools, a lot of measurements. I saw an article today in the Harvard Business Review about measuring trust
Mm.
and trying to actually get some quantitative measurements for executives, because we all kind of give it lip service and we say it's important, but today executives, the trust levels are down across the board. Do you run into that a lot, and do you work with them on what they're doing to build trust with their employees?
Absolutely. Definitely. And in fact, the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, written by Patrick Lencioni,
Yay.
the first dysfunction, right, is mistrust, or having to build trust in the organization. And so work with leadership teams, the leaders, to build trust in the organization. And what's nice with that tool is you can, I have my clients measure their team every year. So they start out with a baseline the first year. Where are they in trust, commitment, healthy conflict, results, outcomes? And then each year we take the assessment again to see where they're improving, and where they're not, where there are some gaps. It's interesting. I have one client where the 50% of the leadership team had turned over. So we were really curious to see how that would impact those 5 leadership functions. And it was interesting. Trust was built pretty quickly in that organization, but it was the accountability and it is typical, is it's really hard for organizations, particularly nonprofits, to hold people accountable. And so
Right.
that's a great tool to measure all of those characteristics.
I'm curious, and maybe I missed something here. The measurements for the organization, were they measuring the executive or just measuring the organization as a
The
whole?
team.
The
So it's
team.
act yeah, so it's actually measuring the team on those 5 components. There are questions that ask, how do you feel? Do you feel this way? Rarely, sometimes, never, are the
Okay.
3 tools, but it's really measuring the team, how the team is working together and building trust, accountability, results.
What do you do? Let's just probe a little bit further on the trust component. What do you think really helps an executive and a team build trust?
Oh, I would say vulnerability, so that to be willing to, admit when you make a mistake, or admit when you need help. The other, I think, accountability, really being accountable to the team, caring about the team, demonstrating that care for them, kind of some of the concepts in radical candor. I think those help build trustworthiness and transparency.
I love that list right there. I think you've got a book right there in the making. Your sequel to the Nonprofit Manifesto. Let's switch over to the book. And we were talking beforehand how I I love books. I love business books. I've learned so much from them. And you said it was a dream of yours to write the Nonprofit Manifesto, or maybe just a book in general. But Tell me a little bit about writing the book and what it's all about.
Sure. Yeah. So as I was going through my journey as a CEO, I started kind of keeping track of things. I, like you can see behind me, all the books. I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I love to buy books. I have to have the real book.
Yeah,
Um, and so, because I'm such an avid reader, obviously the idea of being an author someday has been always in the back of my mind.
sure.
And so I kind of started and had chapters for a book. And then when LinkedIn came around, it was a way to kind of test some of my concepts. And so would post pieces of my book as articles to kind of see if it was resonated with people. And then actually it was, I have my own one-page plan. And so my 3-year highly achievable goal was to write a book. And then was we do an annual training, all the coaches at Metronomics. And I was at that training, and an author by the name of Dr. Ben Hardy challenged all of us to make our 3-year goal, our 3-year highly achievable goal, an annual goal, not to, to just do it now. And so that was back in 2024. I pushed up writing my book. Shannon Sesko, who runs Metronomics, it's her business, introduced me to the person who helped her with her book, Megan McCracken. And I talked with her and we began the process. And that was back in the spring of 2024. And my book was published in June of 2025. So it
Okay.
was a wonderful experience. And I had developed the chapters. So Megan really helped me fill in the content, right? And to tell lots of stories on
Yeah.
each of those different subject areas. So, yep. And the lessons learned over 30 plus years of running a nonprofit.
Tell me a little bit about the structure of the book. I'm sure you've got a bit of your own framework. Is there a lot of personal stories in there? I think you mentioned a little bit about some of your past in there, but was there a kind of a deliberate attempt to create a certain structure for the book?
Yeah, so actually, it follows a similar structure to Patrick Lencioni, where he tells a story. So my book talks about Harvest Hope, and obviously made up organization, but I was able to kind of take all of the lessons I learned across all of the nonprofits I have worked with in my coaching business, and then working in the nonprofit sector, and but communicated that through a story and talked about the one-page plan and then some of the business practices that I use that are really valuable for nonprofits, and then also kind of the lessons learned throughout my career. So that's all kind of weaved into that story about Harvest Hope.
Okay. I'm very intrigued. I'm definitely going to have to read your book, Nancy.
Thank you.
Um, I want to ask you a question now about just thought leadership in general, because you work with so many executives. Do you think that that they should be thought leaders as well within their organization? There's a lot of executives who are like, "No, I'm gonna take a step back and let my team do everything." Do you think that thought leaders should step forward a little more today?
Oh, wow. That's a question I've never been asked. Um, I think so my initial response is I think it depends on the person, and kind of where they're comfortable. Some leaders are, more extroverts and want to be out there and feel comfortable being that thought leader. And I think you also need to be somebody that's a lifelong learner if you want to be a thought leader, because you have to continue to want to learn and grow and change. So I think it really depends on the person. I think there are other execs who want to be more in the background and encourage their people to grow and do some of that. And so I think it really depends on the person and kind of where their focus lies.
Sure, that's a great answer. Let's just pivot for a little bit here
Okay.
and talk a little bit about nonprofit world in general, because I'm working with a lot of for-profit businesses exclusively, and I think a lot of us in this side of the fence don't really know a lot about nonprofits. You're making the case that nonprofits need to think like for-profit businesses, but tell me just about the big picture for nonprofits in today's day and age. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty all over the place right now, but how's it affecting nonprofits?
So I think it has a big impact. I've been talking with obviously nonprofits, and with my book, one of the chapters is about diversification of funding, and I think that's a critical piece, especially right now, because of the turmoil and things going on with the federal government. I'm in California. There are financial issues with the state of California. And so if your funding is all government funding, you've seen it get smaller in both at the federal and the state level. So it's important for organizations, and now's probably a little too late to be talking about diversification of funding, but you still have to do it, right?
Right.
So to have as many channels of funding is really important. So if it's individual donors, corporations, grants, operating businesses within the nonprofit, state and federal, you have to do the more things that a nonprofit can do to diversify the funding, the more secure they will be over time. And the other thing I tell nonprofits all the time is the more money you have, the greater the impact you can
Sure.
have. And that's what's really important for the nonprofit, to have a greater impact in their community, to be able to serve more of the people that are focused on their mission is really what drives a nonprofit. So more funding drives all of that.
I have a question now about two components of nonprofits. One is personnel, recruiting and retaining
Mhm.
personnel. What's the status like for that for nonprofits?
Oh, gosh, it's tough, right? Generally, depending upon your funding, if your funding is reduced, that definitely impacts staffing. And I think over time, nonprofits got to the point where they were thinking, oh, it's we offer this great work environment, or we offer this, or we just can't afford to pay. And I think we're in a place now where nonprofits have to compete with the for-profit world to get quality employees. And really, when you talk about A players, it's very interesting. When you get the best players, you don't need as many players, right? Because if they're all performing at a very high level. And so I really talk with organizations about having high expectations and hiring A players, and not settling for just warm bodies, which
Wow.
sometimes happens, right? But nonprofits are I mean, I think everyone's struggling for employees, but certainly nonprofits are, because most service organizations depend on a lot of employees and or volunteers, but they're people, and you need to make sure that their needs are being met for them to be successful and to stay with your organization. So yeah, it's a critical component, and it's a huge challenge for nonprofits.
And I'm sure that keeping the good people, keeping those A players, you really need a fantastic work culture. Speak to me
Yes.
about how you're coaching your executives to build a really positive, healthy, strong work culture.
So I think that starts with developing core values. One of the components of the one-page plan are the organization's core values. And I think what's important about core values in the culture, it's not about aspiration, it's about exemplification. So you want the organization to exemplify their core values. So you want to make sure your employees are demonstrating and exemplifying the core values of the organization. And that's really the founding pieces of building a strong culture, is when you can identify what are those values that are exemplified in the organization, and how are they going, and how are you going to continue to promote that and create a culture that really is around those core values. The other component of the plan is your why, your core purpose. Why does your organization exist? And really, when you know those two things and can communicate, that's the foundation for building a strong culture.
Couldn't agree more. It sounds like fantastic advice. Nancy Batterman, thank you so much for joining us. I encourage everyone to follow Nancy on LinkedIn. And Nancy, I'll let you speak. How do people get a hold of you if they want to work with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. Definitely through the book. The book is sold on Amazon. You can find the book there. My email is nancy@resultsimproved.com. So I'm easy to find that way, on LinkedIn as well. So all ways that people can find me, and I'm happy to talk with nonprofits at any point about any topic.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nancy, and thanks to everyone for tuning in to Thought Leaders Live. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.